born in Athens, Greece. He had remarkable math skills and abilities beyond his age. He was also a musical prodigy, so it's not surprising that today Andreas is one of Canada's leading social entrepreneurs. He's the founder of Carrot Rewards, Canada's most popular wellness app. He also started Green Rewards, the first mass eco-loyalty platform. Yet with all of his success, it's difficult to believe he had so much fear of who he was growing up.
Athens, Greece, last century was a place that truly had no tolerance for anyone different. I was the autistic kid, so I was the weird kid, so very marginalized. I was the gay kid, so I was absolutely terrified of who I was.
So much conflict growing up.
I grew up with a father who was super loving, super modern, super cool for his era, but he was for his era and his place. So that father used to say to me that he would rather have a dead child than a gay child.
He said he felt extremely insecure as a young man, yet he found strength in his strangeness.
When we're younger and our mind is still maturing, that we want to fit in. But there's that saying, you know, why do you want to fit in when you were meant to stand out? So when did you realize that?
I only realized it in my 40s. Until then, I was doing everything I could to fit in. I really couldn't fit in.
Instead, he changed the world a little bit to fit in. And today, he's a well-known speaker, a leading advocate for innovative approaches to address public health, climate change, diversity, and citizenship. He's also a best-selling author of Misfit, an extraordinary memoir of his journey.
The only reason I wrote this book is to inspire others to figure this out sooner, to not go through as much of their life as I did, trying to quash the things that make them special. All of us grow up feeling like a misfit, somehow. So I wanted to kind of neutralize it.
All proceeds from the book will be donated to 6 Degrees, a global charitable initiative that promotes inclusion, diversity, and belonging.
It's something I helped create a few years ago that's meant to neutralize this ugliness that's going on in our world right now about fear of the other. To quote our PM, he often says that we are stronger not despite of our differences, but because of our differences.
Welcome back. Andreas Souvaliotis spent most of his life trying to fit in as a gay immigrant who lives with autism.
In his new memoir, Misfit, he explains the challenging labels with which he has had to live his whole life with and are actually where he gets his strength. And Andreas joins us now. Andreas, nice to see you. Good morning.
Good morning.
All right, let's start with that right there, labels. A lot of people shy away from labels. They don't like labels. Why is it that you found them, I guess, empowering for you?
Well, it took me a lifetime to realize that they are empowering, right? In fact, I spent most of my life trying to hide away from those things, right? I was trying to not sound like an immigrant, not be visibly gay, not have anyone notice that I was different in terms of my neurodiversity and being autistic. And then I realized one day that all those things were actually strengths. The things that made me different were the things that actually made me more capable of doing things in life. And so I also realized that labels are liberating. Once you tell your colleagues, for instance, that you're on the spectrum, so much more about your behavior makes sense, that your work life becomes easier. Once you tell your friends that you're gay, instead of trying to hide it, so much more of that makes sense and you feel so much more liberated and real. So I've gone from being afraid of those things to being the biggest lover of labels, and that's why I put them right on the cover of the book.
But your parents had some trouble with those labels. You say they're as progressive as they were, they had difficulty wrapping their head around them. And I'm wondering how that shaped you early on and then later.
Yeah, and when you think about it, most parents do have trouble, right? Most parents want their kids to be as normal as possible, even though we seem to be kind of entering the era of misfits now. Now we're realizing finally that it's actually so much better for people to be different, to actually harness the things that make them different, because that makes them so much more interesting to the world. So yeah, my parents were products of their time and their place, and of course they were struggling so much. You know, they were living in a very homophobic society in Southern Europe in the last century. So as you can imagine, that stuff shaped me. The fear of being found out, the fear of being different was so traumatic for me. But at the same time, I noticed that my parents themselves were trying to stand out a little bit and be a little bit different. So that inspired me.
All right, in your TEDx talk, you said that you chose to move to Canada as a teen because we were, quote, a society of misfits. What did you mean exactly by that statement?
Think about it. We're all different. We're all from somewhere else. We all love being different. The man who wrote the foreword to my book, as you probably know, is somehow became the prime minister of our country. And one of his favorite lines is the fact that we are stronger not despite of our differences, but because of our differences. That's kind of the special secret sauce of our country. So I actually really wanted to come to this place where it would be so much easier to fit in, where the whole society embraced me.
We're looking at a picture of you there with the Prime Minister, and as you mentioned, Justin and Sophie wrote the foreword to your book. How did you end up befriending the Trudeaus?
So that's a very unique Canadian story. When I moved here as a young, impressionable teenager, I was so taken by his dad, who was Prime Minister at the time, and I'm sure you remember he was one of the quirkiest, coolest world leaders at the time, and really put us on the map, partly because of how different he was. And without realizing that that was because I was different, I was drawn to how different he was, and I wanted to kind of meet this guy one day and thank him for the inspiration. So as I got older, I tried to find my way to him when he was an old man living in Montreal, failed at meeting him before he died, and the day he died, I wrote him this letter. And the title of the letter was Au revoir, dear teacher and friend I never met. And somehow, through a friend of a friend, that letter ended up in Justin's hands, and that connected us as friends. So, the most Canadian of stories.
Yes. Speaking of high-profile connections, because you're also very passionate about the environment. In fact, you began the world's first eco reward system.
That's right.
Green rewards, and through that, you connected with Prince Charles.
Yeah, he was quite taken by the fact that we were harnessing the power of business and the power of marketing to change the world, which is frankly what I do today with my business with Carrot. But Prince Charles was so taken that some country out there in the world had come up with this big idea, and he wanted us to bring that idea to the UK. So he invited me to the palace, which was a very bizarre moment in my life, as you can imagine. And there were lots of conversations that happened after that that were kind of fun. You know, these things that happen in your life when you were weird that you don't expect them to happen. And I credit my weirdness for that.
Well, you keep good company. I mean, the Trudeaus, Prince Charles, and now Carolyn and Jeff.
Oh, wow.
Ever feel like a pair of brown shoes and a tuxedo? I don't know. Just finally, before we let you go, what is your message for people who feel like they don't belong?
Embrace your weirdness. Figure out what's different about you, and instead of being afraid of it and hiding it and quashing it, just harness it. Again, I'll quote something from the foreword in the book from Justin and Sophie. They said that too often in our quest to fit in, we end up quashing the very things that could make us special.
Andreas, thank you so much for stopping by. Misfit is available now. All the proceeds are going to 6 Degrees, a charity which promotes diversity, inclusion, and global citizenship. Thank you.
And if I could add one thing, there is a 6 Degrees happening today in Calgary.
There you go.
All right, Andreas, thanks again. Pleasure to meet you.